welcome, and we're glad you've chosen to join us. Your time is valuable. So we've thought out how to have a conversation without actually having the outcome predetermined. It's an emerging community that we're inviting you into that takes the opportunity of a conversation to both be stimulated to a new insight, but then to build that into how a community can hold it, embody it, and take it out into the world. So listen in and be part.
Video. So we're live. Here we are. Another day.
Welcome. Another Friday, second Friday.
Yeah, second Friday. Last week, loved the content that we ended up getting. Of course, our conversations are always nice, and I'm looking forward to actually, sometime soon bringing some people from the community on to kind of bring their questions. So I've been kind of seeding the field, if you will, talking to some people in our Facebook community and just letting them know, like, we're going to open this up as an option for people within the Facebook community to jump on and grill you.
No, I love the idea when you first shared it with me. You couched the whole thing in, let's make it a conversation, and then we'll give it away, so that it's pertinent, it's relevant to what people would hope to get when they're listening to someone speak, and it just kind of brings it into the context of their own lives. And you and I have gotten through the years more good things out of ourselves when we've actually put real live conversation or situations to it. So I think when you just live in the theoretical, right, then you can come up with all kinds of screwy ideas, right? When you actually get it out in action, like what's this look like out in life, then you end up with like really much more grounded content. And that's actually me personally. I think you always have lots of great stuff to say, but especially when we're talking about specific stuff in my life, that's where I'm just like, boom, hit something that's like, dang, can really change some stuff. So,
well, I want to say something about that, because I think in my work, what I do is there's some things that that might be core. Speaking of myself or others that would sit in this seat, and you think, okay, well, when you listen to somebody long enough, they have 3 or 4 things they really make the theme of their life. They just know how to say them, maybe creatively or in different contexts.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if people listen long enough, they go, oh, I bet he's going to say this. And in fact, I'll probably go there. But here's the deal. It's not like it's just rote. It's not like, oh, I can't wait to say what I've memorized. You actually need the other person who is in the dilemma or in the choice to actually pull out of you what you have put inside of your own knowledge base. And so it's in the dialogue that wisdom is shared. Knowledge often is kind of a one-way street. I know something, I tell you, now you know it. But wisdom is the emerging sense of how do we apply that knowledge to the situation that you're bringing up. And I wouldn't know to bring up that piece of knowledge if you didn't bring up that situation. And together, something applied is given to both of those people.
Yeah.
And it's something that I just love. I mean, I really cherish it. And therefore, the conversation is the context often for what we're trying to do when we're trying to help somebody. That's why it's critically important I deeply listen to you. Because if I don't listen to you, I'm just here telling you what I know. That's academia. It's not bad, but it's not what we're trying to do, which is more formational than just the information passing.
Yeah, I think that's actually like a really big point that I haven't really thought about in terms of you could go take a class and they're gonna teach you something. You'll learn something. It'll be what they taught the people before you. It'll be the thing that they teach the people after you, with a few exceptions. The content will evolve over time, but this is something much more dynamic. That it is, ultimately that kind of academic content is in there, but it's being, adapted and pieced together in real time in response to exactly what, the person across from you is needing and looking for.
Yep, that's it.
Well, what I really heard in there for myself too is it's equally important then that I really come to the table. Right? If I'm just asking you, this is why I knew this had to be a real conversation.
Right.
And it requires me to come in with something and be open about it. Because if I'm just like, hey Barry, tell us some more about leadership, then I mean we're just going to get real inauthentic content, right?
There you go. And most leadership is knowledge in the field, like in the workplace, in the situation. Can the leader apply what they have learned or believed in the book that was an insight to them somewhere along their journey of gathering the tidbits? Because if you don't learn to take that information and integrate it into how you're formed, then in the field of leadership, you can't call it forward. And so most leaders are confused because they have the information, but they haven't learned how to, the process of integrating it to where it becomes in the field available real time, in the moment. They can pull on it. And then if I can build one more other thing, so let's say that's happening for the leader. And then why is empathy so important is because the leader who knows all this stuff somewhere filed away, hopefully is becoming more of a formation for them. It's still not good to them until they have enough empathy in listening to where they are, reading the context. And then they begin to say, oh, that need reminds me of this thing that's a part of me, my experience that I learned one time up in my head reading that book. And when you become capable of real-time response in the field, that's the sign that the leader is beginning to take information through the process of formation, then out into the empathetic, the understanding of what does this situation need now. And response in the field is called responsibility. You're finally capable of responding as a leader. You have a response in the field real time, and it's effective, and people appreciate it. That's a lot to say, Damien, but I mean, I feel like there's that flow that moves.
The big thing, I mean, there was a lot in there.
There was a lot.
The big thing that got me though was leadership is done out in the field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's funny, right? You can be enlightened all by yourself, right?
That's right.
You can't be a leader alone. Like leadership is done out
very
with
frustrating. People. Very frustrating for you to get lit up in the chair reading that book that tells you, oh, this is exactly the kind of leader I want to be. And then within 24 hours, you fail that very vision when you go out and do something based on what you just read and you go, it didn't work like it did in the book. Well, the gap is called formation. It's just taking data and information into your personality to where you begin to act and hold it as if it were a second nature. Now, some people would call it the character. And then what you then behave like becomes what you've been reading and inspired by. But it doesn't happen without the path and the process of a formation for a leader. And you and I both said in our conversation, that is the gap that's so often missing in business development and leadership type training, is they give you all the information of the top leaders in the world. They don't tell you how to integrate it and become it in a process that makes it yours. And it's frustrating to know something and not be able to pull it off.
I mean, I think everybody has probably lots of experiences where they like just knew, like, man, this is so much who I want to be. And then it's like, you know, anytime I like snap at my son, right? It's like, man, it's not the dad I'm trying to be. And it's just so hard to make the change, to bridge that gap. It touches on where I want to go with this conversation, and something that's been kind of tugging at me anyway. And so, as you know, and you know, in case anybody who's watching doesn't know, it's important for the context. So my sister passed away in November.
Right.
And so it's been a journey in accepting that and learning to appreciate it and grow through it. And one of the biggest things I found, like, one of the hardest parts with that is all the things she wanted to do that was left undone, right? All the places where she had that gap, where she really wished she could be a certain way or live a certain way or achieve certain things. And anything that, like, you know, just kind of accepting that she left and ran out of time. and it leads me to this question about like it's made me very, very focused on what am I doing with my life, right? What am I doing with the time that I've got? And like, what makes a life what's worthy of our time? And what leads us to a place, I think if we answer that, then we end up in a place of satisfaction. I think that's where ultimately where I ended up at, is like, how do I end up feeling like we're all going to end up with things left undone? But how do I end up feeling like I did enough of the right things, or any of it had any meaning? And of course, like you very well know, I mean, my sister touched so many lives and was such a powerful force in the lives of those that knew her. Like, I can see a lot of meaning in that. And I'm playing in that place. Like, how do I find, satisfaction, and how do I, it's kind of like the barrel of the gun that I've been staring down for the last 6 months, right? And like, man, it is scary to be fully confronted with how meaningless life can feel when you watch a life end.
Okay.
And I'm trying to kind of see where to go with that.
Gosh, first thing that strikes me is thanks for putting something that real and that experienced out there for us to talk about. Mm-hmm. Was she the next oldest of the siblings? Was it an age?
She was number 4 in the order. She was the second oldest girl, or she was number 5 in the order, because there's 8 of us, for those that don't know. But
so you guys are in the middle. You guys were in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. She definitely, any of our siblings would agree. She was definitely a leader in our family. Showed up. She was the first to graduate college, and kind of in that was always giving us a call to more, right? Like,
yeah,
live our best selves.
Well, you touched on so many good things there. I think one of the ways that you described it that got me listening right off the bat was that you said, of course, I'm going to end up at the end of my life not having done everything that I want to have done. And I think that's that's an interesting thing to probe into, is how do I do enough? How do I make my life worthwhile? How do I get it all out of me? How do I leave it all on the field? And yet you say the truth that you and I both are going to come to our last day having not done it all and having unfinished work. So we got to get out of this mindset that there's a way of doing enough that's going to satisfy the question you're asking about. Because most leaders are going to use that kind of threat as and fuel and an energy to get stuff done. And that's not satisfaction, and that's not meaning. That's in fact the fear and the anxiety that one can use for energy, but the same amount of time you put into it as an energy, it has a degree of depleting you as quickly over the years. So you're always going to work dissatisfied, hoping to get satisfied. So I just want to pause right there, because I think a lot of people have a relationship with work to try to take care of a fear that their life isn't going to matter unless they get it all done.
Yes.
And the truth is, you're never going to get it all done enough to ever feel good about the satisfaction of your life.
I think that's a big part of what's so confronting about it, is
right.
I have done that a lot of my life. I have found meaning in, like, if I can only just do enough,
exactly.
That'll be as much meaning as I can get. And then I'm recognizing my sister did a whole lot more than I had. And I mean, like, she set the bar high. And so then now I'm confronted with, like, whoa, in the end, like, I mean, I don't want to say what she did wasn't enough, but I see that there's something more there. I can do a bunch my whole life, and I'm still going to end up in the same place.
That's right. And so it's like getting off that treadmill that so many are on, thinking that there's an answer. And it's kind of tied to the thought that, my results are going to generate how good I feel about myself, or my results are going to end up being satisfying to the point where they will answer the question, have I done enough? And I don't know if I've ever met anyone that's come on that kind of quest and they finally did enough to say, my results are in, I finished everything and it's all complete. Most of them say, I've got to get off that kind of thinking and mindset if I'm going to be able to really live a life that has some calm in the center, some peace in it, and then some real, some true energy that's a flow in me rather than an angst in me. Yeah, so I mean, I would pause there to say, what satisfies us is not going to be the results of our work. And as long as we think it's going to be, then we're forever the victims of that which we couldn't control or get done or determine the final result of. So you have to break with the mind that you're in charge or control of results.
I think it's Ben Millman. Is that who it is? The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's one of my favorite all-time quotes.
Does he go there?
It says you only once you lose your mind can you come to your senses.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
So when you said you got to kind of break with the mind, right? You
Yeah.
got to break with this heady idea that like doing enough is going to get you there.
That's it. That's the whole mindset.
Just figure my way there. I can
That's
puzzle
right.
my way through it.
That's right. Because in that mindset is the hidden ego. And the ego is what you're really dealing with. And we disguise it in that great vibrato of, I just want to make my life really matter. I want it to do enough. And really what's happening is an insufficient ego is screaming inside of you. You know, you better make yourself worthwhile. You better find your worth in your results. You better perform better than anyone that's come out of your family, because if you don't, who are you?
Right.
And so that's the negative energy that a lot of people put into positive production. But what the world can't see is for that person, it's a distancing between what they do and who they really need to be. And I think that's, I mean, we've gone into the psychology of this issue, but I think we have to start in the mindset of it before we start saying, well, how do I do it differently? But go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, that's right where I was going with it is I get that conceptually, right?
Okay.
I'm always reminded of Monsters, Inc., Disney Pixar movie.
Yeah.
And the whole message at the end is like they're using fear to like power their monster world, right? And then they realize like actually laughter is more powerful than fear. That's
beautiful.
It's a more efficient energy source, like literally is what they discover at the end. And so I get that in my head, right? But I also know like I've been very effective allowing myself being driven by fear. And so it's scary to flip that switch over to and just trust like, oh, it's okay. I'll just laugh my way through life and I'll end up getting everything done. And it's like,
with that, you make a good point in that we're not very good at dealing with it. Doesn't mean it's not possible. Most of corporate culture lets you have that relationship with fear, and you can even get paid handsomely if you just keep producing and banging those results. And so it's been the way a lot of people have seen their life, as almost to say, well, what other options are there really? And you and I are both saying, well, if we're going to go into formation for leaders, we've got to know and be able to talk intelligently about what are options, what are alternatives. But the first thing is to help blow up the mindset that you're not in charge of results. Now, we've just now recently in the last decade say, if you can't measure it, you can't scale it. You've got to measure what you know, or how do you know? But that's only driven enlightenment thinking that the world is made up of five senses, and if five senses can't observe it, make it evidence, it doesn't exist. So things like hope, courage, love, joy aren't very measurable, so to speak. And so leaders that don't have those are despairing because they still need them, but they're just not attended to. There's not a school that teaches them. It's a life skill to be happy, as every book now that you read tends to have a chapter on happiness, and we're crying out for it, but we don't know how to measure it. So what I'm trying to say is this whole idea of leadership getting jammed to results are measurables so much of the inner character of what gives you good leadership is not just of the five senses, but we don't have a real patterned way to help people begin to learn what those are.
There's two things that come up for me and exactly that. One is I just finished a book yesterday called Full Potential. And it's written by a friend of mine, Nicole Silver. And it said, there's a quote in there that I just loved. It said, hard skills will get you hired.
Okay.
Soft skills will make or break your career.
Okay.
And it was just like, man, that was just like the simplest way I've heard that put, right? And that like, if you don't have like, you know, the love and compassion, things like that, it's real hard to measure. But if you think about like, you know, the most successful leaders I've been around, it wasn't just their results. It was their results, if at all, it was their results as a byproduct of how they could get their team to perform, because there's a different energy in their group than there is in the group next door, because they're, you know, because that just wasn't present. And so I heard that in there, and I really
like that. Yeah.
Get that, right?
That's good. That's hitting where we're talking. And then when you get there, when you get to soft skills, you almost have to leave the business department and go over to the other, if we're thinking of a university, to go over into the other disciplines in order to pick things up that business is actually requiring, but doesn't really know how to teach. So in business, goes to teams. Teams require leaders. And business hasn't done a great job of developing leaders.
Right.
So where does business go to develop the kind of leaders that can work in complexity and uncertainty like the marketplace today is demanding? And so we're throwing it to the young people, not because they're ready for it, it's just because the old models don't know how to respond to it. So everyone now is invited to be an entrepreneur and fail fast. It's almost the best answer we have, rather than equipping people with essential soft skills and leadership, and then good business and some of the things we've learned through the traditions of business. We've almost scrapped it and just said, well, man, you know, just don't think like yesterday, and take your idea and apply it as best you can, because everything's changing. And there's kind of a carnage of young people that we're strewing across the new sectors of business while we're trying to find what kind of leader is the world looking for. Is that making sense? I mean, there's something in there I'm trying to look around. And
even in the world of business, right? I know I talked about this with you recently, like McKinsey and Company, I think it's just last year, started putting together an index for trying to help split apart, or not necessarily split apart, but like separately manage the like business management tasks and the people management tasks. And they're calling it the Helix organization. And that like you want these two things to be, you know, separate and yet integrated, because the people leadership is so necessary. And right now it's just kind of looked at as an afterthought or window dressing, or some people got it and some people don't. But McKinsey is saying like, no, this is actually super vital to the performance of your organization. In fact, it says it accounts for 80% of sustained exceptional performance over time in an organization. And this, you know, this is coming from McKinsey, which is known for its like being super based in data and kind of objectivity.
And they're saying the 80% belongs to one of those sides. You're saying to the people side?
Strength of leadership, yeah.
And right on. And the secret will be the and between the two.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be, how do we build a bridge? And because that's what's happened in the lack of being interdisciplinary towards how we're developing leadership. We've so compartmentalized, and the new convergence of leader is somebody who can make that bridge. Yeah, right. The people skills and then the business practices, and holding that together in a leadership and having a team culture built around that is, I think, where a lot of the formation talk that you and I use, that's when you see the value of it.
Where does that, do you kind of automatically if I live my life as a good leader, right? Do I just kind of automatically end up feeling like I had a more fulfilling life, or I had a life worth living? As long, I mean, so to some extent, like the answer implied in there is, you know, to give it away. But is that, I don't know.
I think so. I think leading, I mean, I don't want to get too abstract, so keep my feet on the ground. I think leading your life is important. I think people have a view of they're going to be a leadership. It's got to come from a title of a CEO or being on the C level or being the executive of. I just think each one of us want to be leading our authentic life, to whether I am a plumber or a principal or a working in software, or if I'm sitting in the CEO seat, I am leading a life. And I think everyone therefore has that leadership to take who they authentically are and need to be, their true sense of vocation. And they need to bring that into the world wholeheartedly, fully showing up in it. And to me, that's the leadership that goes across the vocations of the world. And if you do your real living, you look back on your life knowing you didn't do an impersonation of some other leader. You lived who you were to be in the locale that was given to you for the needs that were around you. And you can ask yourself at the end of your life, did I respond to the needs of the world with the gifts that I was given as best I could? That's a different, for me, measurable than was I the top leader and did everyone else come to know that? And the kind of ego that gets back into leadership. Leading a common life well with a true, authentic sense of being is a gift. So bring me down to earth if we need to be able to put that more clear in this conversation. Leadership so many times has been, I've got to vacate something that it's just so in grandeur. It's such a blown up Superman view of myself. It's so unattainable, and it's going to change so many things, and it becomes idealistic or perfectionistic, or it becomes this stretch of what I am not, but what I could be if I drive myself hard enough. Well, I don't think that's leading a life of well-being. I don't think at the end of the day that person is saying, wow, I really became a great leader on that kind of a path.
I love framing leadership as leading your life. There's, it made me ask myself, like, wait, what's it mean then to like lead your life, right? Yeah. And I mean, like, to be out in front on it, and that it implies like a certain level of intentionality then, right? Rather than just reacting your whole life long to whatever circumstances are happening to you. Good word. Get out in front of it and actually, be intentional about where it is that you're going.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I think you just said it. And you know what? I almost misheard you, because I thought you said, leadership is not leaving your life, but you were saying leadership is leading. But there you go. Many times people think, if I'm going to be a leader, I've got to leave my life and become someone I'm not. And I'm thinking, no. If you're going to be a leader, you actually have to lead the life you've been given, which is, who truly are you? How do you know it? Where did you get your sense of identity? How does that inform the vocation in which you're showing up? And if we pay attention to what I'm going to call that inward work, then who we become out in the world becomes a natural flow of who we inwardly really are. And when a person is aligned like that, they're magnetic. they influence other people. They actually attract more than they have to promote.
Mm.
And they find themselves being a leader in the situations they're in, whether they're titled or organized in some type of hierarchy or not. They in fact are the ones who are leading, I think. And then at the end of their life, they're not going, well, I wonder if I did. They knew they were just being their true self. Now there's old language in this. This isn't too weird. I mean, people talk about it enough, but there's been a lot of perennial wisdom, and there's been some real ancient sources that tell us that if we live against the grain of what we've been made to be, it doesn't matter if you become a great leader. You've suffered the split in the very psyche of your own life, and you can never do enough results or help enough people to really come home to your own life being well lived. So leadership doesn't hit the external needs of the world and do enough results that we finally feel good about ourselves. Leadership is you understand who you truly are, how you've made to fit this time in the world. And then with those gifts, you've entered the world in ways where you're naturally being who you are, growing, moving forward. And at the end of that life, you're congruent with yourself. And you're able to be at peace with your journey. And great things can happen.
I like that. What does that mean to be congruent with yourself?
Yeah. Well, I think that I try to use some language early on that says when you aren't able to be at home with yourself, then everything you go out in the world to do and accomplish is trying to justify and trying to make you feel good about your effort and who people see you to be. And you're living off of reputation, you're living off of people's opinions, you're living off of so many external things to try to be congruent with yourself. Because you don't have the homecoming yet of who you are, no matter if the world likes that or not. You've got to have that inner conversation with who am I and how do I know it? And is it authentically me? Because once you have that place grounded in your life, then you can begin to move the world. But so many people go out in the world to attain a sense of identity that they become susceptible to all the grade givers that the world has.
Yeah.
And we get told who we are. We get told by our reviews if we're good or not. We get told by our performance if we have worth or not. And that becomes a very confusing way to ever feel satisfaction or meaning, no matter how much you end up accomplishing. It's never enough on that kind of a path.
Yeah, that actually like anchors right into a lesson I've been unpacking the last couple of days. And it was kind of triggered by something a friend posted on Facebook, but ultimately where it led me to is I started to realize like how much the idea that I grew up with, which had all kinds of problems of like what it meant to be a man, like really drove a lot of decisions that I made in my life, right? And I grew up under 4 sisters, and so I always felt like, oh man, I'm like too influenced by my sisters. Maybe my brothers said things like that to me. I was too influenced by my sisters, being around all these girls, and so I was like never man enough because I was raised by these girls. And so then I ended up living out my life trying to like put on this identity of what I thought it meant to be a man and trying to convince everybody, like looking for this validation, like, hey, aren't I man enough yet? Aren't I man enough yet? And a lot of the things that I had to spend the most time unlearning were really based in things like that. And being man enough isn't the only one, right? It just is the one that I'm dealing with in the last week or so, really journaling and looking into like, man, where has this touched my life and caused me to act totally inauthentically? So I had asked, like, what does it mean to be congruent with yourself? And for me, that's the, coming to my sense of identity, coming to my sense of congruence with myself. A lot of it is letting go of these false selves that are put upon me by, family expectations or societal expectations or one way or another who I felt like I'm supposed to be. And so I'm like putting up these things, trying to prove it instead of just like coming to a real alignment, a real congruence with myself by recognizing like, oh yeah, no, I'm a little different. I was raised by 4 sisters, and like I'm definitely a little different, and that's okay. I like it.
Oh yeah, no, you're saying it. It's so interesting what is put on us that are like clothes and they don't fit us. It's like putting on your dad's suit when you're a young man. You see it in the closet and you think, oh my gosh, this is what I want to wear. This will make me him. Or you get on your mom's perfume, or you can't wait to drive a car because teenagers drive a car and you're 12, and you tend to think, when I have that, when I can wear that, when I can be that, I'm going to be just fine. And it's only after you get some of those things and wear them for a while and realize they're not telling you yet who you are. And then you start to unlearn and let go, which is the process you were talking about through the journaling. Of things I put on in my story that I thought would be me, and they were simply the needs of the world around me. It wasn't me. So let's just say you grew up. I know one man, he grew up in the 60s and he thought, I've got to go out and be a community activist because the world needs us. And he showed up for 20 years as a community activist. And in fact, after all those years of just being unenergized by his work, but he was meeting the needs of the world, and he was frankly pretty good at it. He had a homecoming, and he's far more an introvert than he is a extroverted community organizer. And finally, from the tiredness of the needs, trying to meet the needs of the world, he became more congruent and realized he's a writer and he's a journalist. And now he's published 4 or 5 really good books that have moved a lot of leaders into a far more congruent path. But it took him those years of saying, well, isn't my best leadership answering the need of the world? Aren't needs what call me out to be a leader? Well, they're a component of how we move into activity, but the needs of the world are not what identify you. They are not who you are. But they're one of the first things you're going to do in the family of origin or wherever you start to grow up, is you'll get your worth by how you show up and meet the needs of the world, because people notice that and they say, wow, that's really good. And so you say, oh, I'm going to be what the world needs. Not bad, but you'll have to unlearn that later. More than likely. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that example. It would like really just clearly illustrates it exactly.
So how many people are sitting in vocational tracks right now that aren't congruent with their sense of really being? They're trying to have meaning and they're trying to live a life of well-being, and they're misaligned in the way in which they're trying to arrive at that. And it's just, your heart goes out to them because you see the collision, and yet they're good people and they're working super hard, right? And you just want to go, oh my gosh, it goes back to a sense of identity. And they go, well, what's identity? I don't understand what that means. Like, what are you talking about? And it's like, how could you live this many years on the earth and not know who you are? How can we get masters and PhDs and not have a well-grounded sense of kind of the truth of our being? Like, who's Damien? Who's Barry? How do they know it? It's a little esoteric, but I believe that is one way I've watched good leaders find and discover themselves, is they're grounded in a deep sense of who they really are.
Yeah, no, I think you're speaking right to it. In my own journey, it reminds me of like, I was told I talk too much.
Okay, there you go. That's a good one.
Especially in school, right? Like, but at home too, I was definitely also told I talk too much. And so I spent so much of my life either, trying to talk less, or just looking at that as a negative. And so even if I was still doing it a lot, I was certainly not trying to let people see that. And it was once I could accept, like, oh, okay, like there definitely has its sides to it. It also leads me to things like this, right? And so I learned how to, not reject the side of me that talks too much, and instead learn to integrate it and learn how I can kind of put it in the employ of the things that I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
it's a good picture. No, it's a good picture.
Together, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, some of the ways when I go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, now some of the times when I work with leaders, I know that they're talking to me about function, something that they're stuck with in the function of their job, or something they're responsible for that they feel lost in, and they need to come up with solutions. And so we start with something that's not functioning properly in their world. But I know that although it's a part of what they recognize by the function getting interrupted, it has to do with more of a formation inside of their own development. And so you say, well, how do you work there? You listen to the earlier ways that they've been formed as a leader. And as they begin to give you handles as to how they think leadership was always supposed to be, you start to realize their formation misinformed them about something that they're using up here on the function. So like in this case in point, I remember being in a meeting one time and I was the leader, and there were 4 people, and it was kind of an executive team. And a question came up that was pretty important about the overall mission of what we were doing together. So I thought, well, if it's about the mission, I better speak up because I'm the go-to leader. So I started talking. I talked probably it felt like to me for a long time. Even when I was talking, I felt like I was just saying a big circle that meant nothing. I mean, I was talking, trying to find my point, and finally I talked myself into kind of a finish. And then there was another silence. And I said, did anything that I said make sense? And one person risked saying, actually not. So
God for those people, right?
We laughed. Fortunately, and this is how you unlearn things, is you can either break yourself over them or you can have some humor and laugh and not take it. And we laughed. And I said, you know what? Is it okay with you guys if next time I don't know the answer to a question, I just remain silent? And they said, that would be wonderful. We give you permission to do that. Isn't that great?
I think there's quite a few people in my life that would love if I would do that.
So I'm functioning as if the leader needs to respond to the essential questions of the team, because my formation is, if I don't know, there's no leadership in the room. We're in trouble. So because my formation is down there, then I function like, well, I got to start talking because I'm the leader. And all I did was expose that I don't know, and that I'm taking up the space. And the team actually probably had another person in that conversation that could have asked a better question to help us find where we needed to go. Or someone else could have just actually said, hey, I think I kind of know what we're talking about right now. But because my formation as a leader is no leader must know, I just started talking. So the function was robbed by the formation I was bringing to it. And I just needed to take a look at that. I just needed to understand what's operating in my leadership was a lack of awareness down there in my own formation.
So you're kind of like, safe to say you're at a different phase in your life than I am. And you've had a lot of really rich experiences. That's why I love and so appreciate these interactions, right? I get the opportunity to kind of learn from paths you've walked oftentimes before I walk it myself. But what's your relationship to satisfaction now?
Oh man, that's a great question. It's a tortured one. It's been lifelong, because no one talked to me early on, and I didn't talk to anyone. They were probably available. I was just too much hidden. And I was on the treadmill of, if I do it right, I'll be satisfied. So I didn't need to talk to anybody. I thought that's how it was going to happen. And the harder I worked, the less I was getting satisfied. So I thought, I need to work harder, because satisfaction is simply doubling down. I can't be wrong. I mean, it's got to be me just getting better results and arriving at more of the vision. And so I pushed harder and kind of married a perfectionism in my vocation. took on a spouse, Miss Perfectionism joined me. And I just thought satisfaction is around the corner. And then I could think crazy thoughts like, of course, it should be delayed gratification. You have to work hard for this kind of stuff. But always it will come on the way that I'm trying to relate to it, which is hard work, will turn out results. And then and then one day some guy said to me, he wasn't even talking about me, but he just said, you know, really when you look at really good leaders, they tend to work with a degree of satisfaction that they bring rather than going to work in order to get or to build or to find their satisfaction. And matter of fact, they wake up most morning dissatisfied, hoping to get satisfied through the day. And I went, wow, that's way too close to home for me. That's true. Like right now, if my life stopped, I'd be super dissatisfied. I'd feel like I got ripped off. I remember having that feeling. I'm not done yet. It'd be like trying to send a kid home, to bed at night. No, not yet, not yet. Give me one more hour. The day can't be over. The job's not done. I mean, I can be more of a, and I realize I'm working from dissatisfaction, trying to get to satisfaction through my own effort. And for me, that was a destructive recipe. And I just thought, I want to stop. I see it, and I finally am at the point of my own life where I don't want to keep doing that with every day I have to walk the earth. Is there another way? And that was I had to have a break with it. I had to see it for what it was before I could begin to say, okay, is there another way? So mine has been more of a confession that most days I wake up learning that I don't want to start with dissatisfied thinking. So I sit in my mornings now until there is a sense, if not even a spirit, of abundancy about my life as I am where I am. That there's nothing else I have to prove in order to accept myself. There's nothing I have to say to the critics of the world to make myself appear before them as, accomplished. Like I could give up that game every morning and know that as I am and where I am, it's a good life now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to review my calendar. I want to open up and see what's going on. And then my little mantra or prayer or thought is, in each one of those appointments today, I want to fully show up. If I fully show up for each appointment on my calendar, then this life of results will take care of itself. But if I am riddled, if I'm important enough, or if I am capable enough, then I take that same scarcity into each appointment, and it just isn't satisfying me enough. I'm always trying to get something more, or overcommitting, or making it a bigger project than it needs to be, or dreaming a bigger. It's like, what's the energy here? So if I can look at my calendar and look at my day that I'm about to go into with the sense that there's abundancy, and it's good to have my life, and it's just good to fully show up in each one of these appointments, I'm finding that there's more productivity and what I might call flow, and therefore satisfaction, that comes my way and works with me as I go through the day like that. Then at the end of the day, then I'll stop. At the end of the day, when I lay my head on the pillow, I only take about 15 to 18, 20 seconds, but I review the day. It's kind of fun too, because it's the bookend. And I just list what was satisfying and meaningful of that day. Like everything else just gets sifted off, but I recapture that day with the eyes of, and where was the satisfaction? And what am I thankful for? And so that kind of impresses on me an attitude and a mindset that I want to take into the next morning when I sit in my quiet spot before I get into my activity, and say, you're satisfied not by what you do, but by how you receive yourself right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you want to ask? Does that make sense? Does that thread something?
Like that.
through
It completely blew my mind. So I'm like struggling to know where I want to even start with.
Well, thanks for letting me go on there for a while, but I wanted to give you
was
like
great.
a 24-hour.
What really got me is two things in there. So you had said earlier about like leadership almost becomes a title sometimes, and it's really not dependent on the title. It's just like dependent on each person showing up as a leader in their life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought about how our conversation started, talking about my sister and how she wasn't by birth order, right? Any level of authority in our family, right?
Good
But
point.
she just showed up as a leader. And I do think like, you know, the saddest, the like regret or pain that I feel over what's left undone in her life, like that's just a reflection of me, right? Like that says more about where I'm at than anything about her. I don't know that she felt that way.
Sure.
I think like her satisfaction was sourced very differently, kind of like what we're saying throughout this whole conversation. What I saw, especially in the last year of her life, was like so much of just being with people that she loved, right? And just like in that being with, and I'm looking for the right word, but like holding a space for and giving love to, and like, I mean, that's what leadership looked like then, right? It wasn't like, you know, she wasn't a leader in our family because she told us all what to do and what needed to get done, right? She just showed up with like a whole heart, right? And emptied it on every one of us every single time, and gave so much of herself, right? So I was hearing kind of in what you're saying, like, man, you know, when you can show up, you look at your calendar and it's like, you know, in each one of these meetings, let me show up with my whole heart. And so that was the first thing I heard, was like, man, that's how she showed up. And that's certainly where I'm finding satisfaction in my life now.
It's huge.
It's you know, it no longer matters how I perform. It matters a whole lot more. Like if I'm a broke bum, you know, a year from now, if I'm still sitting with people and giving of care and sharing of myself with them, then like I feel like I'll feel a certain measure of satisfaction in that.
You do. And
the other thing I heard in that, which was
going.
like the other thing which really got me, because I kind of knew like there's a level of giving of ourselves, right? That is satisfying. The other thing I heard in that was like, actually, it's in showing up with your full self, you're allowing yourself to be seen. And what we're not doing when we're just chasing results, we're actually so afraid of our real selves that we're not allowing ourselves to be seen. And that is utterly dissatisfying.
There you go.
And when we can show up and just be ourselves, and we have this like clarity of identity that you were talking about, and just let ourselves be seen. So there's like this bidirectional thing that happens in being in community, that it's not just about giving to others, right? There's a lot of talk about like
really good,
give of yourself, but it's actually like, man, letting yourself be seen is like really that good. Sounds immensely satisfying.
And that's why we use leadership as a cover to avoid being seen. We just stay in charge. We just manage the results. We hold our power. We talk when we think leaders are supposed to talk. It's a way we can avoid having to show up, because when you show up, you can have to be seen as being vulnerable. And if you don't know who you are, vulnerability is really scary.
Sure.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. So most corporate rooms are playing in a culture where you never have to really show up. Okay. You have to be really good at your project. You have to be skilled. But you and I both know that projects always hit bumps and conflicts and things that strengths and skills just don't solve. And a team doesn't know where to go. And leadership oftentimes has no other tools except just to control it. And the only way to really get there with the team, or to get there with yourself as a leader, is to have some sense of being able to show up for the real conversation that actually needs to happen. And that's vulnerable. And there's great power in finally being the kind of leader that doesn't have to wear the disguise of strengths and skills and answers. And it is really there to show up all the way. And I think that's a powerful way that you just brought a summary around what we're trying to say, that formation needs to be in the life of a person who will become leader because they've done the inner work. They get out of their own way. I love how you said that. And you know, when I said show up wholeheartedly throughout my calendar, the first person you start with is yourself in the morning. Show up to all that you are, the light and the dark, the strengths and the weaknesses. And in there, you start there with yourself, and then you can show up in your other meetings, I think, in that same kind of spirit and that availability of I'm all here. And when you're all there, I think your gifts and your empathy and even your courage begins to flow at new levels, because you've decided this person you're meeting with is the most important person in the world for you right now. Or why be there?
Yes.
I mean, go to where you think life really is better or where you're needed more, but like, don't play the game of this job's not very important, but I have to be here. So like, go ahead. I mean, who wants to be in that meeting? What do you think that meeting is going to turn out like? But if both people in that meeting meet and say, you know what, this is exactly where I choose to be, I'm showing up with all that I am, more stuff begins to generate and happen at that level of true leadership, and then results and flow find themselves.
Man, there's so much written on creativity and flow and how to get these like great brainstorming sessions. And I've worked a lot in that space, right? So I've read a lot and done a lot, learned a lot of techniques for how to like boost brainstorming sessions. And ultimately, the only thing that I've ever seen really work is exactly what you just said, right? It's like the only thing that really works in bringing creativity in that room is like everybody show up like really committed to being in that presence and treating it and choosing like that this is the most important place to be right now.
Right. Which is like resigning from all the false sense of selves, all the impersonations that you would send to that meeting. Like it's learning to let that's the formational work. That's causing the function not to happen well, because everyone's got the formation backwards. So if they can just really show up for who they are, where they are, now that's building the right kind of culture. That takes leadership. But when that happens, people begin to develop trust and creativity at new levels. And that kind of team is an incredible opportunity to be involved with those kind of people. I mean, they'll design all kinds of wonderful things because they got their whole self there. And they're aligned with the truth of their being as best they know it. And that's what they're giving. That's a culture where real work and creativity takes care of the results, as I've seen it.
And I mean, you know, like I said at the beginning, kind of data is starting to bear that out, right? And stuff that McKinsey is putting out is saying, you know, strength of leadership is responsible for 80% of sustained exceptional performance.
There you go.
So really, I think it's exactly what we're talking about. Great leadership inspires, right? Breathes life into that group to where people can have permission to say, this is where I'm supposed to be. Yeah. I'm doing meaningful work, even in the small tasks, and gives life to the projects that need to be done.
And at the at the end of your life, you're not measuring about, did I get enough done? It's, did I show up as the person I was in the places I was given to make impact? Yeah. Okay. Did I get it all done? No, nobody ever does. Did your sister? No. Did she live a full life? Yes. Was she wonderful to be around? Yes. Because she didn't measure her life by, but did I get everything done? It wasn't the results. It was I who I was in every room I walked in. If that's the case, results are going to take care of themselves.
I mean, to your point, it's this problem of perspective. From the inside, you let go of trying to get things done, and you just choose to like love what it is that you're doing. And in loving what it is that you're doing, you end up getting a lot done.
There you
And
go.
so from the outside, people are like, man, look at that person. They're successful because they're getting so much stuff done.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, they're getting so much stuff
Mhm.
done because they've chosen to let go of that and just be really present in what they're doing.
There you go. Now your life and your work have met each other, and that bridge between business practices and your own personal development has finally merged, and you're integrated. So you are satisfied in the place of your work because you're no longer leveraged on how things are going to turn out. And then they're going to tell you if you did a good job or not. That game's busted. You're off that treadmill. And you're finally realizing, no, if I just bring my wholehearted effort to what it is that I do because it's aligned with who I am, then I'm in the place I ought to be in this whole big universe. Yeah. So I think that's satisfaction and meaning that we bring to work rather than go to work to find satisfaction and meaning and then be ripped off because work can never give us all that we've given it. That is a bankrupt way to vocationally walk your life out into the future. And it's not fair to you. And it's not fair to the people that you're doing that to.
Man.
So that's the case that we want to build with folks is, well, then, is there an alternative? Yes, there is. And you can know it, right? And we talk about that inside of our workshops. But to me, that's the reason someone would say, hey, I'm ready to walk into a formational path of leadership. We're like, okay, because we're going to drill down on how do you find a true vocational sense of your very being, and then how do I show up holistically in the world, knowing that. We're like, absolutely, that's what great leaders know. That's what we do. So I love the conversation you brought because it is satisfaction and meaning.
Oh man, that's fantastic as always. Every time, anytime I start this thing, I get a little bit of nerves. Like, I hope we end up coming out. I mean, but it's great every time. That was the last thing you said there. It's satisfaction and meaning that you bring to work.
Yeah.
Rather than going to work trying to find it. It's just like, I mean, totally flipped the paradigm on that for me. And I think that's actually, I mean, kind of brings it all around perfectly. I'm excited to kind of dig into that stuff with you more.
Excellent.
But I got rocks to climb.
Yeah, go do it. Have a great weekend.
And yeah, I appreciate you giving us this time on this Friday. I hope, I don't know if anybody's watching, but whoever watches, I hope they got as much out of it as I did. And
well, if nothing else, this models for you and I what's meaningful and satisfying for our lives is to do this kind of work and just to show up for this conversation. And then if people begin to listen, or if they have been, and they have it resonates, their little receptor goes off, it means that it's true for them. We can't convince anyone this is right. If someone's listened and said, you know what, I think they might be onto something, all we would say back to them is, you're ready for it. That's a hunger. That's the start. Like attracts like. Identify yourself, be part of the conversation, because we'll build it as we begin to see who it's involving. But it's wonderful to be with you, man. So
hey, I appreciate it, Barry. You
appreciate
too,
you.
And anybody watching, thanks for coming on. Come to us with your questions. Let us know what you want to hear from us, and let us know if you want an opportunity to spitball this stuff with Barry too, because we're looking.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Barry, you have a good weekend.
You too, Damien. Bye. Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
So that was another conversation. And again, thank you for joining us, because the contributions each of us made and built on gave us not only something to value in the moment, but now we walk out into the world. So the purpose of Be Do Labs is not just to grab time from you, but to actually give your time more purpose in the next step you take in your life. So embody it, practice it, and come back for more. Thanks for being part of our community.